I had always thought my life was mine to shape. I imagined freedom, small rebellions, choices I could call my own. But the moment my father called me into the study that evening, all those illusions shattered like glass beneath my trembling hands. "Sky," he said, his voice steady but cold, "you are to be married." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My stomach dropped and I clutched the edge of the desk for support. Married? I don't understand. To whom? My mother, standing behind him, didn't answer immediately. Her lips pressed into a tight line, eyes narrowing. "You will know soon enough. It is for your protection, and the protection of this family." I stared at them, the words tumbling over one another in my mind, forming questions I dared not yet speak. Protection? From what? From whom? The study felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in on me as if the secrets they carried were alive, watching. I had spent my life obeying their rules, following invisible lines I never drew. Yet this was something else entirely. I had no say. "My life isn't yours to arrange," I finally whispered, my voice trembling, but firm enough to pierce the thick silence. "You will understand in time," my father said, but the certainty in his voice did nothing to comfort me. It only deepened the pit of unease twisting inside my chest. That night I couldn't sleep. My room, once a sanctuary, felt like a cage. I stared at the ceiling, imagining all the ways I could escape, all the ways I could fight. But fear clawed at me, whispering that some chains were stronger than mere rebellion. 2 days later, a letter arrived and signed, slipped under my door. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The words were simple yet terrifying. "He is not who he seems. And your family is keeping more from you than you know. Be careful who you trust." The message burned in my mind, a spark of both warning and defiance. Who had sent it? And who was this man they were forcing me to marry? My thoughts spun in circles, the room suddenly alive with questions I couldn't yet answer. The following evening I was introduced to him. Ethan. A stranger in a tailored suit, his gaze sharp, calculating. He didn't smile. His presence wasn't warm or welcoming. It was a silent reminder that the life I knew was over. "Sky," he said, his voice calm, almost detached. "I suppose we have an arrangement now." "Arrangement?" I repeated, bitterness rising in my chest. "You mean marriage?" "Yes, I know. I also know I didn't agree to it." He raised an eyebrow, the barest flicker of amusement crossing his features. "No, you didn't. But it doesn't matter. The choice was never yours to make." The words struck me harder than I expected. Rage, fear, confusion. Every emotion collided in my chest. Yet as I looked into his eyes, I sensed something deeper. He wasn't simply a stranger. He knew something. Something my parents weren't telling me. That night, I stared at the photograph I found in his pocket when he handed it over. A picture of two families, their faces smiling, their eyes hiding secrets. And in that moment I understood. This marriage wasn't about love. It was about survival. And somehow, someway, so much worse. The day Ethan arrived at our estate, the air felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I had rehearsed the conversation in my mind countless times, but now, standing before him, words deserted me. He was tall, composed, every movement precise, yet there was an intensity in his gaze that made my stomach twist with unease. He extended a hand. "Sky," he said simply. No warmth, no greeting, just a statement of fact. I took it reluctantly, feeling the firmness of his grip, the cold edge of someone who had been molded by circumstance, not emotion. "Ethan," I replied, my voice barely steady. The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents sat nearby, faces unreadable, as though watching an experiment unfold. I wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but the weight of his stare pinned me in place. "You seem different than I expected," he said finally, tilting his head slightly. I bristled. "Different? I haven't even had a chance to figure out who you are, and yet you make judgments." He studied me, eyes narrowing, and then unexpectedly he smiled. A brief, fleeting curve of his lips that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. "Perhaps. But I have seen enough to know we are not free agents in this story." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Not free agents? I realized then that this man, this stranger, was already more entwined with my fate than I had imagined. Dinner was an uncomfortable affair. The conversation was formal, polite, but the tension was palpable. Ethan answered questions with precision, never offering more than necessary, yet his eyes often flickered toward me, sharp, assessing as if he could see through the layers my family had wrapped around me. Later that evening, after everyone had retreated to their rooms, I found him in the garden, standing beneath the moonlight. Shadows danced across his face, making him appear both distant and dangerously close. "Why are they keeping me in the dark?" I demanded, unable to contain myself any longer. Ethan's expression softened for a fraction of a second. "Because some truths are dangerous," he replied quietly. "And some lies are built to protect more than one person." I shook my head, frustration bubbling inside me. "I don't want protection. I want honesty. I want to know why my life is being controlled like this." He stepped closer, but not threateningly. "You will know in time. But knowing comes at a cost." The garden felt suddenly smaller, the night air thick with unspoken secrets. I wanted to trust him, yet everything in me screamed caution. Still, there was something about his presence that pulled me in, a quiet gravity I couldn't ignore. Days passed and I began noticing the small things. His subtle glances, the way he seemed aware of unspoken dangers, even the notes that appeared under my door and signed but urgent. It was clear, he knew more than he let on. And so did my family. That night I stared at the ceiling, heart racing. I realized that Ethan wasn't just a stranger I was forced to marry. He was a key, a puzzle piece that could unlock the secrets my family had buried for decades. And whether I was ready or not, I was being pulled into a web far larger than myself. The estate felt different at night, quieter, heavier, as though the walls themselves were keeping secrets. I wandered the halls alone, searching for answers, guided by a sense I couldn't name. Something about Ethan unsettled me, but it wasn't fear, it was curiosity. I needed to understand why my life had been pulled from my hands and why this marriage, forced and unnatural, was being orchestrated so meticulously. It began with a note. Tucked beneath my door, neatly folded, the handwriting urgent yet careful. "Trust no one. They are hiding something in the West Wing. Look for the room with no key." My pulse quickened. The West Wing had been off limits for as long as I could remember. A chill ran down my spine, but I didn't hesitate. That night I crept through the dim hallways, every step measured, every shadow a threat. At the end of the wing I found it. A heavy oak door, old and unmarked, with no visible keyhole. My fingers traced the surface and my breath caught when I realized the door wasn't locked at all. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, and the furniture was draped in white sheets, as though the room had been abandoned for years. On a small table, a stack of letters caught my eye. I approached carefully, lifting the top envelope. The seal was cracked and the paper smelled faintly of smoke. I unfolded it, scanning the words. "If the truth is revealed, lives will be lost. Keep her away from the West Wing. She must never know." My hands trembled. Who wrote this? And why was it addressed to someone trying to protect me from my own family? Before I could investigate further, a shadow fell across the room. Ethan stepped into the doorway, silent and watchful. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, his eyes scanning the letters in my hands. "I have to know," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "Why is this wing forbidden? Why are there warnings about me?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Because the past your family buried here, it isn't just dangerous. Kill. And it's tied to this marriage." I felt the weight of his words like a physical blow. "Kill? What are you talking about?" His gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability hidden beneath the stoic mask. "Sky, you are standing at the edge of a secret that was never meant to be uncovered. Every choice your family made, every plan for this marriage revolves around keeping it buried." My stomach churned. I thought I had understood control, manipulation, deceit. But this was on another level. The room, the letters, the warnings, all pointed to something catastrophic. And yet I couldn't turn away. Curiosity burned too fiercely. For the next few days I pieced together fragments. A photograph hidden behind a painting, an old ledger with coded notes, whispers in the servants' quarters that hinted at a fire, a death, a cover-up. Each clue made my heart race, each shadow seemed to whisper the same thing. The truth will come at a cost. And then one evening I found a small locket in the garden. Inside was a picture of a young woman who looked eerily familiar, her eyes a mirror of mine, and beneath it a single word etched into the metal: sacrifice. I stared at it stunned. My pulse hammered. This was no ordinary arranged marriage. This was a pact, a protection, a curse, all wrapped into one. Ethan found me again that night, locket in hand. "Do you understand now?" he asked, his voice grave. "This isn't about us. It's about what your family did and what they've been hiding for years. And soon, you'll be forced to choose." I held the locket tight, feeling the cold metal against my palm, my mind racing. The shadows of the estate seemed to grow around me, alive with secrets, threats, and the promise of a truth so dark it could shatter everything. And I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. The locket burned in my hand, a cold weight that seemed to pull me toward the truth. Every corner of the estate whispered secrets now, each shadow a reminder that my life was no longer my own. Ethan's presence beside me both unsettled and reassured me, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this web of lies. It happened the night my parents hosted a small dinner for some distant relatives. I slipped away while the adults were distracted, following a narrow hallway I had never noticed before. My steps were quiet, careful. My heart raced with every creak of the floorboards. At the end of the corridor, I found another hidden door, smaller, almost disguised as part of the wall. I pushed it open. The room inside was dimly lit, papers scattered across a dusty table. On the wall hung a faded painting, beneath it a map with red circles marking locations I didn't understand. And then I saw it, a file thick and labeled in my father's handwriting, "The Fire Incident, 2003. My hands shook as I opened it. Smoke-damaged documents, reports of negligence, and witness statements. One name repeated itself across every page: Ethan's family. My blood ran cold. I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan's voice was calm but serious. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." "See what?" I demanded, though my throat was dry. He sighed and stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your father's company caused a fire years ago. My uncle died because of it. And the marriage, this arrangement, it was never about tradition or alliance. It was about paying a debt, covering up a crime, and protecting your family's name. You are part of that plan." I stumbled back, clutching the file. I'm just supposed to marry into this, to keep it quiet." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. And the locket, the notes, the warnings, they were all attempts to prepare you for the truth without putting you in immediate danger. But the full weight, that comes now." Tears blurred my vision. Every memory of my family, their smiles, their lectures, their rules, flashed before me in a new horrifying light. They weren't protectors. They were manipulators. And I was their pawn. I sank to the floor, the documents spilling across the room. Why? Why involve me? "Because the world will only listen if the heir is involved," Ethan said softly. "Your marriage legitimizes the silence, prevents exposure. They think the alliance protects everyone, but the truth, it could kill." I swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of what he said. Death, betrayal, lies, all wrapped into the life I had thought was mine. And suddenly the choice was mine too. I could obey. I could marry Ethan, keep the secret buried, and live a life dictated by my family's sins. Or I could risk everything, confront the truth, and bring the past crashing into the present. I stared at Ethan, searching for reassurance, but he only nodded once. The weight of the world felt heavy on both our shoulders. And in that moment I realized, nothing could prepare me for what came next. The secret that could kill wasn't just a story in a file. It was the axis on which my life would turn. The morning of the ceremony arrived with an eerie calm. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the estate, illuminating the grand hall that had been prepared for a marriage I never chose. Every detail, the flowers, the candles, the carefully arranged guests, felt like a trap. A stage set for my compliance, my silence, my surrender. I stood in my room, veil in hand, staring at my reflection. The girl in the mirror looked fragile, yet her eyes told a different story. They held fire, defiance, and a clarity I had never allowed myself to embrace before. Ethan entered quietly. His gaze met mine, and I noticed for the first time not the coldness but a kind of understanding. "You're ready," he said softly. "Ready?" I echoed, gripping the locket in my hand. "For what? To step into a lie? To become the pawn in my family's centuries-old game?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer, lowering his voice. "You've learned the truth. You know what they've done, what they've hidden, what they intend. Whatever you choose now, it's yours. The words settled around me like a cloak. For the first time, the power wasn't in my family's hands. It was in mine. The hall filled with guests, murmuring politely, oblivious to the storm that raged in my mind. My father approached, his expression unreadable, his expectations clear. He extended his hand, expecting obedience, compliance. But I didn't move. I looked at him, then at my mother, their faces reflecting centuries of control and pride. And finally, I turned to Ethan, who waited silently, his presence steady, unwavering. "I know everything," I said, my voice steady. "About the fire. About the lies. About why this marriage was arranged." A hush fell over the hall. The whispers stopped. My father's face hardened, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of manipulation pressing down on me. I refused to be a pawn. I refused to live a life dictated by secrets and sins that aren't mine. If my family wants the truth buried, then they must face the consequences of keeping it hidden. Gasps echoed through the room. Some guests looked shocked, others scandalized. But I didn't care. My voice rang clear, commanding the attention I had long been denied. Ethan stepped forward, taking my hand gently. "Whatever happens next, we face it together," he said. And in that moment I realized that I wasn't powerless. The secret that could kill was no longer a shadow over my life. It was a weapon I could wield, a truth I could reveal, a liberation I could claim. I turned to my father, my eyes steady. "The wedding will not happen. Not like this. And your sins, your lies, they will no longer dictate my life." The silence was unbearable. And then my mother spoke, her voice trembling for the first time. You are stronger than we ever imagined." I smiled faintly, knowing the journey wasn't over. Justice, revenge, revelation, it would all come in time. But for now, I had claimed something no one could ever take from me. My own choice. The hall seemed to exhale with me. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and wild. But for the first time, it was truly mine. I walked out of the room, locket in hand, Ethan by my side, leaving behind a legacy of lies and stepping into a life of truth. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never let anyone write my story again.